Ululuku, with whatever we do. Jioni safu nola, with whatever we do. Haleyi demu new school, nyepamne nekulukula, nyepangiragala gena, nekulukula. Ibuloke nongoto ni beti sola, ibuloke dato ni betoto.
Bengi Congo.
Lamin.
Na?
Lamin te jibe norin te nyamen Lamin.
Kabo na wulo kono.
Wulo kono nyinta mo Lamin.
Pa bilenki.
Muna ngata afongole.
Haina.
Ngata. Ngoto le. Fabrama.
Bengi. Baba nyola.
Ngoto le Fabrama.
Namu jumara kan kuma ni ten.
Fabrama.
Jumara mu.
Ndele bare muso.
Nunda mana.
Kamo kata.
Jamani mbere.
Alindo ko.
Jamani.
Bari ngoto man kontande.
Bari jamani fana na mundu ma ko kontan.
Ngoto minaka ngala min je fon filita la Lamin jibe nori nyaala.
Lamin ila siran sama ne benki. Yala so tol sayni no ko ngol ko momo.
Ngoto.
Nam.
Itedinte yalo ne Lamin hakilo diata bake karamungoto. Anu santeng ministry ko di ngole si suko na amake ko do holiday
si bitun
Bagona ringa.
ala ni ko kede namo balo
ala ni na ko na karta bulo be dam ala ni je
ngoto
nam
ngoto mon kontan fere
jamani mu ne keda
ite ka Lamin ki wulo ko no nyintay mon ko do fete malo Lamin nyande sila la be la moy kala karango
jamani karamol be soron ne ko fasita wulo ko nako
karamol ma soron ni ko karamol soron da amake comme holiday lem ngoto dini wo nyanta sila la ala karango la moy yamen kamen fue man kontan andamande
alla nyin kombo courant adanda la kombo len do la jankara mol le soron do kamen courant ma do la kombo e don dol fana na kara mol soron je kara mol soron Lamin ada lo nyino la man tara fe na sokon ala mu nekela
ama Lamin ite fede malon ko lesinol be ke kar radio to
Nga fine.
e ko yana mo Lamin
Nga fine.
ya mu na fonye
kabim bina kan tambita nteri maning Fatu tambite la sukala ala diningol bebe siri be la moyka
faru danso am fana tambita jele ni subala la ngaje diningol be jet talanta nen kili warol e be serin jelet
sa Lamin fadante ku kili wo ke no la ba Lamin bitaka wulo ko no nyinta mo Lamin
amandara fenela
ite dine ko di man si yakari la suno la moy radio to e balon na
mu ne ka ke afonye ba nyara ni alon
telentel jikot
afonye ba mu de be ke
ite balon tel be jikritel ni man karambe ku kele yaje nata karana mbasa malaya e tarije
par ñarande kombo courant ho findira kombo ide na raje den sonka bay ko Lamin manya tala wulo ko kara mo be so da fa nyembe be
ko to wole nati bayo ngalle ni Lamin kuntala kombo courant o ka fa me kombo courant asototal wala kinay ko e sisu kono bari ni ko e sisu kono be karangol di ke la radio lin telel to hani tele masoto to nyaay man tele soto da bungo bar radio be bulen koto batiri sanga ay si ay alamo
sa do kala
nyaadi ko ta o bulaji
ado kala nyaadi
kamun ke nyaadi
radio abe wala mo la be mona falaje
ibe la karandirol kala jele
ti talle be radio ko men ka karandirol
ila subjector baby jele baby jele
wala nan ka coco moy fa dan so wolya ngom metambi ka nga dinni wolje be ikadum bungo ko kada farmo
a sototal de
Lamin mala be kara wala de
bari
lafta alal ideal on ko inde every year second wala fourth
muna ni ko di ma ko nde ko folle sinila ba nde le sinilo ne ba
mbasa mba foke en koto wole fango yen wulindi yalo famo keta bat ñu fana bulata ko ko don meyen nati jambi Lamin nyanta karana ntel beji ko be nyineka ya bulay kara wulo kana ta kilar ya bambalo yo be bulaje koto dinni ngoy si ayala le sino la moy radio
wara ka munda kara mo man so Lamin nyanta kara si so na regular
sila le ayala le sino
dal ko korna ko smalo
kilar ya
be ngala ko momo sa mi do ni ko no kera
bengi bruzo
ndaba ko la da ba rosa no radio ba no bari woro radio ni abe jele ba ngamra do man dembe buljan dala nyara nyara woro ko fendi mo la Lamin tayra ba rosa
bara te ku folo ajibe nori nya labi tamete ku
teku
bari ko do famo ke
ja image nañu ñambol si zol le keje kisgi man si zol no le kafun ka ñowa bari ñambu kino ni mañana ka finde ni nambe ko so la ga
ngalle limbeta de be ñambo do dilanna
ñara nim ko ridin fenat ñara nata
bari famo ke da
ngata bungono tabi bungono ñara ngando ko fele ko ke baru nganda ni pelo la ndija
iyo awa betar la
bungono bismillah bisu diara
pendulala ye fongo tanka sina dolu tanka koro ta koro
Hello viewers and listeners, it's Mr. Sirifba again, teaching you financial accounting, and we are still on the topic bank reconciliation statement. So the last lessons we had, we were solving questions, different exercises. We solved 2 exercises. The first exercise was on the columnar format, where you are given both the cash book and as well the bank statement. I told you when they set questions like that, we need to know what are the procedures involved to solve such a question. So the other one is the statement form, because these are the only 2 ways in which WAEC set questions on the bank reconciliation statement. Either they set it in a form of a columnar, meaning they will give you both the cash book and as well the bank statement. So the other one is in a statement form, literary form, wherein there will be no cash book given in the question. They will only tell you this is the balance. And I told you that they will set this balance in 3 ways. The first way is they will tell you that the cash book balance is a debit balance. The second one is they will tell you the cash book balance is a credit balance, or it is an overdraft, or it is an overdrawn. So they keep on speaking these languages, but it's all the same. Overdraft is the same as overdrawn. They're just using maybe past tense, past participle of the verb, but actually they're referring to the same thing. Credit balance is the same as overdraft. Credit balance is the same as overdrawn. So the other one is they will not tell you any balance. They will not tell you it is a debit balance. They will not tell you it is a credit balance. So how do you know that whether it is a debit or credit? But we're going to apply the principle in that case. Cash book is considered as an asset. Cash is considered as an asset. So the law says the opening balance for all assets is always debited, regardless of whether the types, whether it is fixed asset or current asset, the opening balance. So in a question where they don't indicate any balance under the statement form, you should debit the balance, because that's what the law says. But before we come to the statement form, we have a question. So the 2 questions that we solved, they were all debit balance. And what did I tell you about the debit balance? And how would you know that as a student, this cash book was a debit balance? And why should we know that it is a debit balance? It helps us when we are preparing the bank reconciliation statement. Because if you are preparing the bank reconciliation statement, we add one item and subtract another. So we need to know that which one should be added and which one should be subtracted. But in order to know which one should be added and which one should be subtracted, it depends on what was the adjusted cash book balance. So what did I say? I said if the adjusted cash book balance happens to be debit, if the adjusted cash book balance happens to be debit, what do? We are going to add unpresented checks. Unpresented checks. And what do? We less uncredited. We less uncredited checks. But what of if the adjusted cash book happens to be a credit balance, meaning the credit side of the cash book is more than the debit side, or the brought down in the cash book is found on the credit side? It means it is an overdraft. And if it is an overdraft, why should we know that whether it is an overdraft or it is a debit balance? We need to know it so that in preparing our bank reconciliation statement, we will be able to know which one should we add and which one should we subtract. Look at here, when we know that the adjusted cash book balance is debit, it helps us to know that uncredited checks are added and unpresented checks are subtracted. What of in a case that the adjusted cash book balance happens to be credit, meaning the credit side is more than the debit side? The opposite will happen. You know, here we said if it is a debit, we add unpresented checks, we less uncredited. But if it is a credit balance, we do the reverse. That is why it is very important for a student to know. Anybody who tells you that, okay, we always add unpresented, less uncredited, it is not correct. It depends on the situation. It depends. And that situation is the cash book balance. So if the cash book balance is credit, they said we don't add uncredited, we don't add unpresented, we add uncredited. I give you a simple logic here. I said, okay, credit. Okay, when the balance is credit, add uncredited. Credit, add uncredited. You can apply that logic because if you know one, you know this one, you can obviously know this one. Because the opposite of this credit balance is going to be the debit balance. We add uncredited checks and we less unpresented. Simple and straightforward. Unpresented checks. Then we will get our answer. So I was just trying to emphasize the importance of knowing whether the cash book is a debit balance or it is a credit balance, because it will help us to prepare our bank reconciliation statement. You will see that when we are solving the practical, I will tell you whether it is a credit balance and I will tell you whether it is a debit balance. So we have a question on the board, and this question, I will tell you whether the question is an overdraft or it is not an overdraft, so that any time that you are given a question in an exams, the students would first critically observe the question, and after observing the question, they need to know what should they follow, what are the procedures in solving that particular question, or else, because this one has to do with reconciliation. And if you are reconciling something, it means the first step you need to follow is what are the causes of the disagreement. If you cannot identify the causes, you cannot able to reconcile the bank statement balance and the cash book balance. But before we even look at that question, there is something that you need to look at. Should we solve this question as a reconciliation question, or whether we should not solve it? How would you know that? We are going to know that by looking at the balance. We have what we call the cash book balance. If you look at the cash book balance, we are given, according to the question, the cash book balance is 478. 478. And the bank statement balance, that is the balance that is in the bank statement, is what? Is 402. 402. Look at this. The cash book balance shows 478. The bank statement balance shows 402. Did they agree? No. There is differences. There is differences. There is a disagreement. This is why they call it disagreement. Disagreement, this is two syllables combined together. This in English means not, and agree means a consent. So something that do not agree is called disagreement. So therefore, if it is this, if the different disagree, what should we do? That is why the topic existed, so that we can reconcile the difference that exists between the cash book balance and the bank statement balance. But in a case that the balance of the cash book is equals to the balance of the bank statement, you don't need to reconcile because they are the same. So the primary purpose of this solution is to reconcile the disagreement between the cash book balance and the bank statement balance. By the end of this exercise or this question, we should be able to reconcile the disagreement by identifying the causes of the disagreement. So let's move on to the next part. Why is this question an overdraft question? Point number one, it is an overdraft question because the balance brought down will be found on the credit side. Point number two, it is an overdraft question because the carry down is found on the debit side of the cash book. Point number three, it is an overdraft question because the credit side of the cash book is more than the debit side of the cash book. Simple and straightforward. You know, accounting, whenever you prepare an account and you realize that the carry down, normally the smaller side is what carries the carry down, and the bigger side is what carries the brought down. So obviously by looking, you can able to tell where is the carry down found, and the carry down is found on the debit side of the cash book. And if the carry down is found on the debit side of the cash book, the brought down will be found on the credit side of the cash book. So what do? We already know that now it is an overdraft because the credit side is more than the debit side. Or you can look at the question. If you look at the bank statement, according to the question we have on the screen, they are telling you OD. That OD means overdraft. Please, bank overdraft is not a joint word. This is a separated word. The bank and the overdraft are separated. So the overdraft is joint. The over and the drafts are joint, but the bank is separated from the overdraft. So if they ask you now, you write in bank overdraft, that's too disgracing, you know. An accounting student should not be making such errors. So the bank and the overdraft separated. So it's called bank overdraft. I don't want you to make it of that of the jewelers whereby they say you have to leave space, you leave 1 meter space, where in the bank and then the overdraft there's a lot of space. No. They are not joined. You should not join them, and they should not be having that little gap also, whereby you live in a lot of space. No, it is not also accepted. So we already know that it's an overdraft. There is a sign telling us that it's an overdraft. But what about in a question when they don't write OD, OD, OD? That is why I don't want to emphasize on that one, because specifically, and it is already identified. I want to focus on, I want to tell you the concept behind it. Why is it an overdraft? By looking at the cash book. So now what we need to do is, we are going to look at that first exercise. Look at that first exercise. So the first assignment, we have assignment 1. And the name of the business is Bintu Sonko. Bintu Sonko. And the requirements are, we have adjusted cash book, adjusted cash book, adjusted cash book. I don't know, the currency, first of all, is Naira. We have the currency as Naira. Currency is Naira. Then the other one is bank reconciliation statement. Bank reconciliation statement. A statement to reconcile the disagreement between the cash book balance and then the bank statement balance. Bank reconciliation statement. Don't forget the date, as at 31st December. 31st December. The year is 31st December 1995. We have 95. We have the currency here. We have the currency here. So what do we do? After writing the format, we have the T format for cash book. And cash book is divided into 2. Regardless of whatever, whether it is large cash or small cash, it's all divided into 2 aspects. The right side represents the payment side, right side. Why did they say right side is for payment? Because we know that accounting said the right is always for credit. And if you are paying, you are always giving when you are paying. So the right side represents payment and the left side represents receipts. So receipts are debited. Why? Because when they are receiving something, it is coming in. So the value of that thing will increase. Obviously, the value of the cash is increasing, and cash is an asset. If you are receiving cash, what happens to the value of the cash is increasing. And according to the double entry principle, anything that increases the value of the cash, you credit. So if you are paying cash, what happens to the value? The value is reducing. And anything that reduces the value of the cash, you are going to credit. So that is why they say payment, cash is going, you credit, is reducing the value. And then receipts, cash is coming, is increasing the value, you debit. So you see, accounting principle, double entry is the most important thing, is the foundation and the building block of accounting. So we need to understand the principle. That is why whenever I'm solving questions, regardless of the topic, I always want to apply the principle, because it is the bedrock of accounting. So the principle will help us and it will guide us in solving accounting questions. Now after that, let's start with the first thing. I ask you, whenever you are solving question on the bank reconciliation, the first thing you need to do is the balance. Remember, whenever When you wake up in the morning, there is always something you start with. That is going to be the opening balance. And at the end of the day, you have to sleep over the night. You see, that is the end of the day. So for every carry down, there must be opening balance. That's it. So you see, accounting principle is still applicable there. You must start with something, no matter what happened. Whether you wake up to pray, that will be the first thing you do, there's going to be opening balance. Whether when you are sleeping, at the end of the day, you're sleeping, you pray, that is going to be the closing balance. So obviously, at the beginning, you always start with something, and probably at the end, you end with something. So what you start with, the opening balance, is very important. Is very, very important. So now, anytime that an account is open, according to accounting, the first thing we start with is the opening balance. We start with the opening balance. It's the beginning. So let's see, how do we start with this opening balance? First of all, we look at the carry down. You can look at the carry down aspect. If you want, you can look at the brought down aspect. If you look at the carry down aspect, if the carry down is credited, you debit it in the adjusted cash book. If the carry down is debited, you credit it in the adjusted cash book. And according to this question we have on the screen, the carry down is debited. So if the carry down is debited, the brought down will be credited. That's why they call it is a credit balance. But we cannot conclude by saying because of the beginning start with a credit balance, our balance will be credit. Sometimes you can start with a credit balance and the balance will be a debit balance in the adjusted cash book. But in most cases, when you start with a credit balance, it's a clear testimony that your balance for the adjusted cash book will be a credit balance, meaning the credit side will be more than the debit side. We can conclude for now. Let's see what comes next. Let's start with the balance at the beginning, balance brought down. The balance brought down we have is 478. 478. That is the opening balance for the adjusted cash book because the carry down was on the debit side, so the opening will be on the credit side. So let's move on to the next point. Let's move on to the next point. The next point is we need to compare. Compare the bank statement with the cash book. Comparing the bank statement with the cash book will help us to prepare the adjusted cash book. We don't compare debit with debit. It's not possible. You cannot compare day and night. You cannot compare today and tomorrow because these are two different days. So what you do is, accounting said, you compare your debit with your credit. You compare your credit with your debit. So we can start with any. You can start with the debit side, enter in with the debit side. You can start with the credit side. There is no law which is trying to govern us regarding which one we should start with. No. What they need, the cash book should be balanced, and the balance will help us to know whether it is a carry down or it's a brought down, or whether it is a debit balance or it is a credit balance. Now, for me, let me start with the credit. Right is very important. I start with the credit side of the adjusted cash book. So if I'm doing that, I need to compare the debit side of the bank statement. I repeat, the debit side of the bank statement with or against the credit side of the cash book, because we said debit compared with credit. Let's start it one after the other. Let me start with the balance brought forward. Balance brought forward, we have 606 and the balance brought forward 606. No problem, correct. Remember, we are only looking at items that causes the disagreement, not items that did not or do not cause any problem. So let's continue. The next one we have 64. Please, you first look at, if you are preparing the adjusted cash book, please don't say compare, you just look at anyhow. No. If you are comparing preparing the adjusted cash book, students should focus on the bank statement and compare it with the cash book. That's very important. Because if they say compare, you start looking at the cash. No. Why are we looking at the bank statement, comparing it with the cash book? Because we are preparing adjusted cash book. We are looking at what is not recorded in the cash book. And whatever is not recorded in the cash book, we have to adjust the cash book and record it. So it can either be on the debit side or it can be on the credit side, depending on what type of error that occurs. Now let's start with the first one. Enyang, we have 64. 64 is there, and 64 also is recorded on the credit side of the cash book. So 64, 64, the same amount, the same name, no problem, so we don't need to reconcile it. Let's go to the next one. Forget about the items. You can look at the items but the figures, very important too. Look at, we have ABA. ABA 154, ABA 154. The bank has debited 154 for ABA. Let's look at whether the cash book have credited the same amount. If the cash book credited the same amount, no error. If the cash book did not, we need to credit it in the adjusted cash book. ABA 154, ABA 154 on the credit side, correct. Let's look at the next one. Standing order 57. Standing order, the bank has debited standing order. But do we have standing order on the cash book? No. So the bank has recorded it, no problem in the bank statement. But let's see whether the cash book has recorded it. No. So we need to record it. Where is the item not recorded? The credit side of the cash book. So we record it on the credit side of the cash book. Standing order. And that standing order is 57. 57. So let's move on. The next one we have bank charges. Bank charges. Bank charges has been recorded by the bank. It's a deduction. So the bank will debit bank charges in the bank statement, because anything that reduces the value of the account holder, the bank will debit it. So charges reduces their account. So obviously the bank will debit them. So if the bank debits them, they will not even realize this thing, because they will make the deduction automatically. So they will not realize it. They will only realize it when they receive the bank statement, which will show what has been happening between them as a customer, or between the customer and then that of the bank. So the next one is bank charges. 30 is recorded as bank charges in the bank statement, but it has not been credited in the cash book. So we are going to credit it so that we can solve or reconcile that problem. That is 30. So that problem has been solved. You see, this is very simple because they say the best you can give somebody is what the person needs. If they said somebody is not having this, so the best you can able to solve that person's problem is to give the person what he or she needs. So if they said the credit side of the cash book has not been made, the credit side, no entry was made on the credit side, what do? You credit it, and then you have reconciled the problem. That's it. So let's move on now by comparing the credit side of the bank statement with the debit side of the what, or against the debit side of the cash book. Let's do it one after the other. We have 108, which is a check on the credit side of the bank statement, and then we have the same 108, which is P-table, which is recorded on the debit side, correct. No error, because what the bank has credited is the same amount that the cash book has also credited. Let's move on to the next one. We have 196, which is also a check, and we have Esfanta 196. The bank has credited 196, and then the cash book also has debited 196. Credit is equals to debit, so the balance has been realized, and equity has been realized. An equal amount has been realized both on the debit side and also on the credit side. Now let's move on to the last one. Traders transfer, just like when you say credit transfer. Traders transfer, we have the bank has credited it with 205, but the bank statement cash book did not debit it with the same amount. So you see, the error is not found in the bank statement. The error is found in the cash book. So we have to correct it in the cash book, not in the bank reconciliation statement, in the cash book, because it has been credited by the bank, but it has not been debited in the cash book. So we have traders transfer, which is 205. So what we do, we need to add this to compare and determine the difference. So we need to compare by looking. We can able to tell. That's why sometimes some students will write this amount, put it aside, write this. No, students would always look at the balances and they will be able to tell which side is greater than the other side. So that we just start with that side. The total will be recorded here and the total will be recorded here. Then we find the difference. So we have 478 plus 57 plus 30. So the amount we have is 565. 565. So the difference represents balance carried down. And then we have balance brought down. Balance brought down. What is the carry down? The carry down is the difference between the credit side and then the debit side. And it represents the balance at the end. So we have minus 205. So what we have is 360 as our balance. 360 as our balance. So our adjusted balance of the cash book is 360. The balance that was there, which is 478, was wrong. Why? Because there were some items that were not credited in the cash book, and there were some items that were not debited in the cash book. So the corrected amount, the adjusted amount that is correct after making other entries is 360. Now, before we prepare the bank reconciliation statement, students should know whether the adjusted cash book is a debit balance or a credit balance. I told you why, and I repeat. The reason why you need to know that, because if it is a credit balance, you add uncredited checks and less unpresented. If it is a debit balance, we add unpresented checks and less uncredited checks. So let's see whether it is a credit balance or it's a debit balance. How do you know it? I gave you 3 points. Point number 1, if the carry down is on the debit side, it means it is a credit balance. Point number 2, if it is the brought down is on the credit side, it means it is a credit balance, which is overdraft. Point number 3, it is an overdraft when the credit side is more than the debit side. These are the 3 ways in which, but all of them are talking about the same thing. The brought down found on the credit side, the carry down found on the debit side, and then the credit side more than the debit side. It's all referring to a credit balance, meaning it is an overdraft. So what do we start? We have a balance. This is an overdraft balance. Balance as per adjusted cash book. And the overdraft balance as per adjusted cash book is 360. So after bringing the balance as per adjusted cash book, I told you you can start with the balance as per bank statement. You can start with the balance as per adjusted cash book. So if you start with the balance as per adjusted cash book, but students should know this. As far as the purpose is to get your answer right. It's good to know both, but stick to the one that is easy or easier. It will help you to get your answer quickly without wasting a lot of time. Now after, because the balance is a credit balance, the law says if the balance is a credit balance, if the balance is a credit balance, you are going to add, because it means it is an overdraft. And when it is an overdraft, we need to add uncredited checks, then we less unpresented. So we have add uncredited checks. So how do we identify the uncredited checks in this format? I told you that the items that are found on the debit side of the cash book. Here we are comparing now the cash book with the bank statement. We charge it against we compare it against the bank statement. We look at what is in the cash book and it is not recorded in the bank statement. Not what is in the bank statement and it is not in the cash book. Please, if you are preparing the bank reconciliation statement, we compare the cash book. In this format, we compare the cash book with the bank statement to see what is in the cash book and it is not recorded in the bank statement. So here we look at it one after the other. Any item that is recorded in the cash book and it is not recorded in the bank statement and it is found on the debit side is represented by uncredited checks. Mean you see the bank did not credit it because of late presentation of the check. Now let's look at it one after the other. T-table 108, correct, no problem. We have the next one, S-Fanta, 190, 196, 196. The cash book has debited 196, and then this one also, the bank statement also has credited 196. Let's look at the next one. S below 119, the bank has debited, the cash book has been debited with 119, but the bank statement did not credit it. So this is what we call uncredited checks. We write S below. $119. Let's add it. That's 360 plus 119. What we have is 479. Then we less on presented. The unpresented checks also, if the unticked items on the credit side is unpresented, obviously uncredited, obviously the untick on the credit side will represent uncredited check. I repeat, the items that are on the debit side of the cash book and they are not credited in the bank statement represent uncredited check. The items that are credited in the cash book and they are not debited in the bank statement represent what we call unpresented check. Let's compare one after the other. We have what we call 606 is there, the balance brought forward. We have 64, it is in the credit side of the cash book and also on the debit side of the bank statement, correct? We have 154, it is on the credit side of the cash book and as well on the debit side of the bank statement. We have what we call 77, which is called IPSIN. IPSIN has been credited with 77 by the cash book, but it has not been debited by the bank. So IPSIN would represent 77. We put bracket. The reason why I did not put here less, because I'm opening bracket here, is saver. Some students will write here less and they will add. So if you put bracket, obviously, this bracket is represented by calling a parenthesis. In accounting, bracket means subtraction. Bracket means subtraction. Less also means subtraction. So less, bracket, they're referring to the same thing. So here, the difference will be minus 77. Our answer is 402. So this is going to be balance as per bank statement. Balance as per bank statement. Balance as per bank statement. Now let's confirm whether it is correct or not by looking at the last balance of the bank statement. According to the question, the last balance of the bank statement is 102. Overdraft balance is an overdraft balance. Overdraft balance 102. It is correct. So therefore our answer is correct. Our answer is correct. So the next one is, so here this balance we have, okay, you see the bank reconciliation statement. If you are preparing the bank reconciliation statement, you can start with the balance as per bank statement. You can start with the balance as per adjusted cash book. It depends. I told you that you can only start with the balance as per bank statement if you are given the bank statement balance in the question. If you are not given the bank statement balance, you cannot start with that one. Obviously, you will be compelled to start with the balance as per adjusted cash book. So there is no problem with that. You can start with any balance, provided that both of them are given. Because if you start with the balance as per bank statement, you need to understand one thing. There is a reverse entry that occurs. So we need to be very careful of that. Just stick to one and then you will be safe. Because if it is a balance as per bank statement, there is something that we need to take our time on. Because if it is a balance as per adjusted cash book, this is it. We look at whether the balance is a credit balance. If it is a credit balance, we add uncredited and less unpresented. If it is a debit balance, we add unpresented and less uncredited. So here, there are no errors. I told you that if you have debit errors are added to unpresented checks and credit errors are added. Sorry, debit errors are added to uncredited checks and credit errors are added to unpresented checks. In case when we have errors in such questions, we need to be very careful because there are different ways in which they set the question. But I just have to give an idea that if you have debit error or credit error, debit errors are added to uncredited checks. I repeat, uncredited checks. Debit errors, that's where they are added. Unpresented checks, that's where we add what we call credit errors, unpresented checks. So now, if you add uncredited checks, that is below 119 to 360 will give us 479. And then the last one is we subtract unpresented checks. And unpresented checks here we have Ipsin, and then is 77. So 77 minus 479 minus 77 will give us 402. And that balance is the same balance we have in the bank statement. So therefore, our answer is right. Clap for yourself. And that was the end of the first assignment, the solution for the first assignment. So time is not on our side. So when we meet again, we are going to discuss on the second assignment, which is given in the form of a statement, so that we can also learn how to solve questions on the statement format if it is an overdraft. Thank you for your attention. God bless you all.
Calling ambulo luku with whatever we do. Jioni safu no la with whatever we do. Hale yi demu new school. Nyepamne ne kudlukula. Nyepangi ragala gena. Nyepamne ne kudlukula. Ibuloke no moto ni beti sola. Ibuloke dato ni betoto.
Bigi Congo. Lamin. Na. Lamin te jibe norinte. Wuloko na nyita mo Lamin.
Pabilenki.
Muna ngata afongole.
Haina.
Ngata. Ngoto le. Fabrama.
Mingi. Baba nyola.
Ngoto le Fabrama.
Namu jumala kan kuma diten.
Fabrama.
Jumala mu.
Ndele bare muso.
Nunda mana. Jamani mbere. Jamani mbere.
Alindo ko.
Jamani.
Bari ngoto man kontande.
Bari jamani fana na ramu man kontan.
Ngoto minaka ngalamin je fom filitala. Lamin jibe nori nyala.
Lamin ila sira sama na benki. Yala so tol sayni no ko ngol ko momo.
Ngoto.
Nam.
Iterinte yalo ne Lamin hakilo diata bake karamungoto. Anu santeng ministry ko di ngole si suko na amake ko be holiday
si bitun
bagona ringa
ala ni ko kede namo balo
ala ni na ko na karta bulo be dam ala ni je
ngoto
nam
ngoto mon kontan fere
jamani mu nekata
ifika Lamin ki wulo ko no nyintay mon ko do fete malo Lamin nyande sila la be la moy kala karango
jamani karamol be sorande ne ko fasita wulo ko nako
karamol ma ko ni ko karamol sorande amake comme holiday lem ngoto dini ngo nyanta sila la ala karango la moy yamen kamen fue man kontan andamande
alla nyin kombo courant adanda la kombo len do la jankara mol soranda do kamen courant ma do la kombo e don dol fanena kara mol soranda kara mol soranda Lamin adara lo nyino la amanta ra fena sokon ala mu nekela
Lamin ite foyde malon ko lesinol be ke kar radio to
nga fine
e ko yadi mo Lamin
nga fine
ya mu na fonye
bi kabin mina kan tambita nteri maning Fatu ndambide la sukala ala diningol bebe siri be la moyka
faru danso am fana tambira jele ni subala la ngaje diningol be jet talanta nen kili warol e be seri jelet
sa Lamin farante ku kili wo ke no la ba Lamin bitaka wulo ko no nyinta mo Lamin
amandara fenela
ite dine ko ni man si yakari la sino la moy radio to e balon na
mu neka ke afonde ba ñaara ni alon
telentel jikot
afonde ba mu be ke
ite balontel be cikritel ni man karambe ku kele yaje nata karana mbasa mala ya etarije
par ñarande kombo ku an findira kombo ide na rajede ni sonka bay ko Lamin ma ñata la wulo ko kara mo be so da fa ñembe be
ko to wole nati bawo ngalle ni Lamin kuntala kombo kurang o ka fa me kombo kurang asototal wala